let's look at some of the current ventures, okay? Nigerian gentleman who came through an IBM Smart Camp competition in Boston 3 years ago when I met him. And he was very, very aghast with the drug counterfeiting that was happening in Africa, and how many people were consuming rat poison and all kinds of horrendous substitutes, thinking that they were actually taking medicine that was good for them, and how many people it was killing. So he leveraged the cell phone infrastructure, right? There's no question, everyone's got a feature phone, and everyone knows what SMS was. So he created an incredibly simple solution that would allow you to send a text to the drug company, and they would validate whether the lot number was a lot number that they had shipped. An incredibly simple solution, but he has probably saved many, many people from getting very sick or dying with that simple solution. And this is an example. I'm going to talk about funding, but the Acumen Fund is a new kind of investor. It's an investor that doesn't just look at your financial return, they look at your blended return. They look at your financial return plus your social impact. So Sproxel is a perfect example of a blended venture, and Acumen is the ideal investor behind that. Now, here's another example. Woman named Victoria Hale. Victoria is the head of the first ever nonprofit pharmaceutical company called One World Health. Victoria has been given many awards, and what she's basically done is she says, yes, we have the big three, we have HIV, we have malaria, we have TB, but we have a lot of other diseases that kill a lot of kids around the world with parasites, okay? And what she was able to do is she was able to identify different types of drugs that were not patented in emerging economies, right, in bottom of the pyramid kinds of markets. And she was able to go through clinical trials, right? So most pharmaceuticals today cost anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion plus to go through clinical trial before they get approved by the Food and Drug Administration or through other organizations, right, other regulatory bodies. She is able to bring drugs to market spending between $10 and $15 million, okay? Just a small, small fraction, because she's using the IP that has already been developed by these large pharmaceutical companies. They are not targeting these specific markets, these specific diseases. And so she's done a tremendous amount of work. She's been at this for about 10 years. She's won many, many awards. And she's been funded by the Gates Foundation and by the Clinton Global Initiative. So she is one person who is, you know, benefiting from charity, but she's doing extraordinary work, having really high impact around the world. And there's a lot on all the people I'm going to talk about. If you're interested in learning more, they're online for sure. Okay? Now, okay, I'll go back to this right. I'm going to talk about a company called Diagnostics for All. Diagnostics for All, I'll let you read about them for a second. Okay? They came through an MIT 100K entrepreneurship competition when I was a judge back in 2008. So let me just let you read what they do. Okay, so I know some of you have biomed backgrounds or, you know, chemistry backgrounds, biochemistry backgrounds. So I'm just trying to provide some relevant examples to each of you. So it turns out this was a team of people that came from the Middle East, won the MIT 100K, and then because of the incredible impact that this had on the competition and the fact that they wound up getting all this visibility by winning the competition, they recruited a woman named Una Ryan. Una was a serial CEO in the Boston biotech community. So it's just another example of how incredibly significant this trend is becoming, where you're attracting people that have had incredible success in the for-profit world trying to make good, right? Trying to actually have social impact. So Una is now the CEO of Diagnostics for All, and they're also growing very significantly. Okay, just some examples on the left. You've got some sheets of their devices, some of the wicking fluid, some of the colorimetric output, and on the right-hand side you can see their liver function test. Okay, all made of paper, extremely inexpensive. Okay. Now, David Green is a classic, hardcore Silicon Valley entrepreneur who was inspired to begin to address the problem of eye diseases. And so he, for many years, was a very successful entrepreneur in the advanced technology world, and he decided that he would begin to work with people that had cataracts. And when he began to look at the problem, he saw that the cost of these things was ridiculous, and it just really defied logic in his mind, why people would have to pay so much money for what appeared to be relatively simple devices. So he spent a lot of time going around the world, going to the top manufacturers, you know, being invited in, looking at their manufacturing processes, looking at their research processes, and said, I'm going to figure out a way to design these myself using best practices in manufacturing. And he said, I'm going to reverse engineer this thing where I can actually deliver this to the market at the same quality that people charging hundreds of dollars a year are delivering at $2 a device, okay? And he figured it out, okay? You talk about being on a mission from God, he figured it out. So he's now doing intraocular devices, he's using differential pricing, he donates these to people that cannot afford them, but he sells them to those that can. And he's now into sutures, and he's really expanding his product set using the same principles that allowed him, you know, to make Oralab one of the leading providers of intraocular lenses in the world, period. Okay? And another Silicon Valley entrepreneur, Robert Trachtenberg, created this company called Benetech. Now, he was running a company, and he got inspired because of a family friend that was going blind. And he decided he would start to think about, is there a way for me to create reading devices for the blind? And he went to his investors and he said, you know, I've been thinking about this project. What do you think? Now, they had just written him a $25 million check. And they said, I'm sorry, but, you know, we've invested in you to profit. You know, we can't afford you to be distracted. So he created this nonprofit on the side as a starting point. And he had a friend of his who was a lawyer that helped him set up this nonprofit. And eventually, it started to get some traction, so he actually left his core business. And he started this company called Benetech, and they've now created a national library for the blind. And very much like they're doing with, like Oralab is doing, they're selling them to those who can afford them and giving them away. So this is another example of someone who's using technology, you know, as a way to really help people. Okay? He's gotten lots of positive notoriety for what he's done. Okay? I got this out of order. That was placed separately. In many, many parts of the world where people do not have the opportunity to work in technology industries, they wind up doing things that are well below their means, right? There's a woman, Linda Rotenberg, who started a group called Endeavor in Latin America because she was inspired. She met a taxi cab driver that had a PhD in engineering and said, this has got to stop. So she created this extraordinary entrepreneurial ecosystem to make sure that people were employed, matching their brains, matching their intellect. So this is another gentleman, Orlando Bonilla, who saw the incredible talent that people had that wanted to write software. And there was really no vehicle to do that. So he actually created a program, he created an organization that would bring people to work, and he would find funding for people that had no jobs. And they would start doing coding projects for large software companies. Okay, so again, giving people the dignity of a paycheck. So I'm just trying to show examples across a lot of the disciplines that I suspect are represented in the room tonight. Okay, and that's their headquarters. Okay, so some other things that I think are very inspirational around bottom of the pyramid. What I'm going to talk about now is going to be about design thinking. So when I talk about design thinking is what has guided Apple for the last 30 years to design the kind of products that you're used to, right? That are extremely different than a lot of the other hardware and device products that we've had, right? And the incredible ergonomics and the incredible user experience that goes into an Apple product. So I want to talk about user experience, and I'm quoting here Frank Lloyd Wright, a very famous American architect. Okay, whenever you design anything, consider it in its larger context, whatever that environment might be. So anybody know the firm known as IDEO? Anybody know IDEO? IDEO is the world's most prominent innovation consultancy. It would be probably one of the coolest places that you guys could get a job. Honest to God, if I was graduating from Rutgers today, be a place I'd be thinking about very seriously. So IDEO talks about design thinking, right? And one of the things they talk about is, you know, a focus on human values, empathy for the people that you were designing for, and feedback from these users is fundamental to good design. okay? Embrace experimentation. Prototyping is not just a way to validate your ideas, an integral part of the innovation process. You build to think and learn, okay? Now, why am I putting these slides up? This is a great example of this. Okay, so we talked about global annual deaths from HIV, TB, and malaria. The greatest of all is this thing called indoor air pollution, okay? Indoor air pollution, where people are burning coal or carcinogenic things that are in their households. And young kids are dying and people are dying because they're home cooking over these stoves. So here's one attempt to eradicate indoor air pollution, okay? Young woman, Jessica Matthews, Nigerian woman, who went back to Nigeria after she completed her undergraduate degree at Harvard and said, you know, she saw some extremely poor kids playing with a soccer ball. And she said, look at how, even though they're extremely poor, look at how joyful these kids are. Play is just one of those things that, you know, is just such a universal shared experience. Is there a way to do something with that? And she had this extremely simple idea. What if you could capture and store energy in a soccer ball? What if you could use that energy to light the hut at nighttime? What if you could use that energy, you know, to power up your cell phone? Because a lot of these people spend 20% of their income every month just so they can charge their cell phones, okay? What if you could prevent them from burning kerosene